This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about the most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. It is I, Old Gingerface, here with you. Thank you for being here, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all the rating and reviewing that's going on. And, of course, thank you for listening to the back catalog. I appreciate that. Whatever platform you're on, give it a like, a 5-star comment. Do all those things to get some interaction on the podcast. I truly appreciate that. Really excited for today's show. Have a guy with just an enormous career and reputation. His cases, he retired lieutenant commander of the Bronx Homicide Task Force. His cases have been featured on many crime TV shows: Netflix, True TV, Discovery, Fox News, 60 Minutes, Frontline, 48 Hours, and A&E. The author of the famous textbook Practical Homicide Investigation, which is now in its 5th edition. He is also the author of Sex-Related Homicide and Death Investigations. He's a world-renowned homicide expert, and many active and retired detectives and investigators have used his textbook. Also called the Godfather of Homicide, who I'm talking about is the great Vernon Geberth. Geberth. There, I got it.
Geberth. Vernon Geberth. Yes, sir.
Sir, honor to have you on the show. I'm so happy we connected. And, I got your links and everything else. I started looking into them, and I was like, oh, my goodness. I saw the forward to your book originally. The forward was written by Janine Pirro, who's now Judge Janine Pirro, who was then district attorney. I said, man, this is crazy. This guy's got. It seemed like everybody was reaching out to you for major high profile homicide cases.
Yes. I immersed myself in this subject, and as a result of my interaction with so many different agencies across the country, I was invited in to participate. And you know how police are. They're very protective of their information, but
Sure.
They knew that I wouldn't share it inappropriately. I wouldn't use it for my own benefit. And by the way, that's why I was able to revise the book constantly, because I became aware of some fantastic tactics across the country, which is interesting because when I first started teaching, the first thing I had to do was get over the fact I was from the NYPD and from New York. The guy kept saying, this is not how the New York City Police Department does it. I promise you, this is practical homicide investigation. So I had one of my toughest groups in Chicago. They loaded the class with somebody at real old-time tough detectives, and they had a whole bunch of new rookies in there, and had a laugh on day one. One of the old-timers challenged me, and I came back, and I said, okay, you want to play games? Here's a list of questions. You go, no, you win. I said, I wasn't here to do a contest. We're here to share information. So it worked out well.
Yeah, I'm sure even being an expert in the field like you are, you got the opportunity to rub shoulders with so many different homicide divisions that only strengthened your abilities, because you're picking little things up that everybody else does.
We learn from each other. It's no one is independently the smartest person in this business, okay? I know when I first started, I was studying and trying to be the ultimate homicide detective, and then I found out there's no such thing. It's a teamwork effort. It requires many people, and many people with different disciplines, and I just feel blessed with what I have accomplished. I really do. And, at one point when I was still teaching, I could focus my classes on any place in the country. Down south, I had southern cases. On the West Coast, I had West cases. Northeast, I had Northeast cases. Midwest, I had Midwest cases, because I had been invited in and was applying the tactics to their cases. So it worked out well.
Yeah, that's great. So when you're becoming a NYPD copper, did you have anywhere in your mind did you think, I want to go into homicide, or this is what I want to do, or did you kind of get interested on the job?
I became a New York City cop because it was my vocation. Interestingly enough, I was in college at the time when my name finally came up on the list. And I never told my family. The only person who knew it was my girlfriend, me and my girlfriend. And I was in my junior year in a Catholic college called Iona College in New Rochelle. And I was taking business because back in the 60s, they didn't have something called criminal justice. So
Right.
I took business. Why not? And my third year, the brother who was the guidance counselor is, Mr. Geberth, you haven't chosen your practicum, the company that you're going to be with for the summer. I said, oh, I have it all covered, brother. I got it. He goes, what's the name of the company? I says, NYPD. He goes, what? You'd become a what? You went to college to become a cop?
Yeah.
I say, hold on, slow down. You see that collar you got around the neck? Is that your vocation? Well, that's my vocation, the NYPD, and that's the truth. And I had the way it was set up. It looked like I was going to be appointed to the NYPD in December of 1964. And just like everything else in New York City, there was a fiscal crisis, and that didn't happen. But we planned our life around it. We planned for our marriage in October. Me and my girlfriend got married, went on a honeymoon, and came back. And in the interim, I was in the World's Fair Police Department because they were taking people off the list.
The World's Fair Police Department.
The World's Fair Police Department. It was like kind of microcosm of, oh, yeah, the New York World's Fair.
Well, I've heard of the World's Fair, but I didn't know they had their own police force.
Yes, it was the Pinkertons, but they were designated a police force under the state of New York. And all of the bosses and administrators were NYPD personnel. So basically, it was like being in a microcosm of the NYPD. Everything was the same. The procedures were the same. The directions were the same. Even the forms were the same. But instead of saying UF, Uniform Force, it said WF, World's Fair. And it was really funny because the old timers say, listen, kid, if you don't screw this up, you might get the real job. I said, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's like a glorified security force, police force. The Pinkertons, I mean, they go back to the railroad days. I mean, they were known for, they were like the hired guns. They would rough up labor groups, and they would go after people that are robbing the railroads. I mean, they're very historic in this country.
Well, that's why they got the contract. Okay, because basically they had the expertise, and they hired people from New York to basically train people. And here I am in the World's Fair Police Department. We're going to get married and come back from our honeymoon, and oh my God, I'm laid off for the season. I was, oh, holy shit! I've had a job since I was 12 years of age. I always work. What am I going to do? My wife says, don't worry. There's another class coming. You'll be okay.
Take it easy.
So I ran. No, I didn't take it easy. Listen. I was a newspaper boy. I was working at a drugstore. I was working supermarket. I was in a retail store. So I was driving a cab, driving trucks, and as luck would have it, it was the holiday season, and UPS was looking for workers. So you had to show up at what they call a barn, and you had to be there 6 o'clock in the morning and hope that somebody would pick you. So 3 days in a row, I'm up there at 6 o'clock. Nobody picks me. I'm going, jeez, this isn't working out too well. Finally, on the fourth day, guy goes, I see you hanging around, kid. You're going to work on my truck today. Well, nice. By the time I finished, I had my own truck. I had my own route. I was UPS man.
That's funny. Yeah, so you're the type of person, when you take a hold of something, you give it your all. If you're gonna be a janitor at a school, you're going to be the best damn janitor they ever had.
Yeah, and if I have to shovel poop, I'll shovel a lot of poop. I don't care. I had never had an ego when it came to work. But you know, it's interesting because in my life experience, I was a lifeguard, okay? I was a volunteer fireman. I was a security guard. I drove an ambulance. In each one of those occupations, there's certain skill sets that you pick up. And the trick in life is to carry those skill sets into the next career so that you can fall back on something, but also have an awareness of what's going on around you.
Yeah, it's smart.
It's kind of, it worked out for me.
Absolutely. So, Vernon, can you take us way back to when you got the call, you got out of academy, and you're on the road. Can you remember the first call you went to where you had like an adrenaline dump, or that would be considered like a hot call in New York City?
Well, first, you have to get through the police academy. I aced the police academy because I was a college person. Also, my proficiency in firearms, I was like number 3. So I got selected for a really neat unit called the Tactical Patrol Force.
Nice.
The Tactical Patrol Force is like the Green Berets of the NYPD. And what's important to point out today is back in those days, they had police corruption. It was kind of systemic. The Tactical Patrol Force never had a scandal of corruption. We were the crime fighters. 24/7. We didn't handle 80 cases. We didn't do traffic investigations. All we did was crime work. And I was an arrest machine. I was locking people up left and right, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. in the morning. And when there was a riot, we would respond to the riot. So as soon as we graduated from the police academy, we went for further training. Okay, so we went for training with sniper rifles, crowd control. So basically, we were a specialized unit. And the beauty of it, and it hasn't happened since in any career, in any other job, The harder you worked, the better you were, and the more apt you were to be promoted.
Oh, merit-based. I think, imagine that.
A brand new idea, merit-based promotions. Hope, can you imagine?
I know.
In 3 years, I managed to get into the detective division as a white shield detective. I didn't have a gold shield yet. I still had to perform for a year or 6 months. And getting the gold shield is a big deal in the NYPD. It's the
I hear that.
gold shield detective. And we have different ranks. We have the 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 1st grade. And I spent some time there. So now getting back to the question, my first hot call, we had nothing but hot calls. But I think probably the one that really was a baptism of fire was we responded to what we thought was a dispute at a building, and it turned out to be a racial incident between the Puerto Ricans and the blacks. And it turned out the guy had a gun. And we arrived on the scene, and he pulled the gun on us. We couldn't shoot because of the crowd. We struggled. We took him down physically. We finally have him under control. We have the gun in our possession when suddenly we're surrounded by a hostile crowd that want to take him back. Now, that's an experience, okay?
Yeah.
So we put out a signal 1013, assist the police officer, and all of a sudden the cavalry arrives and basically extracts us from the crowd, and we bring him in. So that was the first hot call that I had.
Man, yeah, that's got to be an adrenaline dump. You're just trying to get your job done, then you got to worry about everything else around you.
Well, we worked in high crime areas. We were like I call myself a ghetto cop. All right, well, everything was nonstop, and the experiences in those areas was eye opening because for somebody like me, I came from the suburbs, but came from a lower economic neighborhood, but I never saw anything like that. And the abandoned buildings and the drugs and the violence and the abandoned buildings weren't abandoned. There were people in there. Whether they were crazy people who had been prematurely released or whether they were criminals, there were people occupying those buildings. So what would happen is the owners would abandon the building and the electricity and water wouldn't be there. So they would get their electricity by hooking up to the building next door and get their water from the fire hydrants, and that next building would go down. Now, within the buildings, there were drug dealers, and the drug dealers had pit bulls. So the scary part of
some things never change.
Yeah, I know. And the trouble was you just didn't run into one of those buildings because you could get hurt because the buildings were booby-trapped. For instance, you'd run into the building, and when you get to the third floor landing had been removed. The bad guys knew to grab onto the bolster and swing over to the other line. You come running up, you go right down into the basement of the spikes and crap that was down there. So it was like guerrilla warfare, really. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Unbelievable. That must have been such a weird, just a weird thing to, like so polarizing, going to work and then like going home to a nice wife or girlfriend, to a nice little apartment or house. You know what I mean? Like you're working in like the jungle and you go home and you're it's like a different world. It
is a different world. Plus we were TPF cops, so we didn't have our own locker in the precinct.
What does
Everything
that
was in the
TPF
trunk.
mean?
TPF. We didn't have lockers. The stuff was in the trunk of our car. We would pull up to a precinct, and it'd be like a recon unit. They'd establish a communication. Okay, we had our own radio system, and we would go out into the street, 2-man patrols. And the first thing we would do is we would take to the roofs, because to make sure all the bricks, the bottles, and things they would throw at us were off the roof. Then we'd begin patrol. So it was pretty interesting.
Jeez.
Got a few medals in that. I got a few medals in that detail.
Yeah, man, it sounds action packed. Vernon, when you homicide question for you, for the listeners and for me, because I'm not much of a homicide investigator myself. You get a brand new case. What are the critical first steps you take to make sure that the case is going to go well? You're going to get the right evidence.
Well, you're jumping ahead of me. Before you get to homicide, you got to go into other areas, and I'll answer that question. But what I want to point out is you just don't end up going to homicide. The career path is usually narcotics. Everybody's got to go through narcotics. Now, the interesting thing about narcotics, if you can survive in narcotics, dealing with the people you're dealing with and the informants, everybody's lying. The trick is to find the truth. Okay, once you deal with that, that's another skill set. Okay, now you're learning how to deal with different kind of people. After you get to narcotics, possibly robbery. Now, another skill set. So by the time you come to homicide, you're pretty well rounded as an investigator. All right. Now, I came into homicide as a boss. Now, as a detective sergeant, I'm smart enough to realize you don't tell people with 20 and 30 years how to do their job. They already know how to do their job.
Right. Never goes
Your
over
trick
well.
your trick is to supervise that. So in order to supervise that, you have to learn the job. And that's what I did. I basically began to shadow who I believe to be the best detectives. And because I couldn't possibly make up for 20 years' experience, I started taking notes. I had my own protocol. On my days off, I would go to the library. You didn't have Google in those days, okay?
Yeah.
I had index cards. And I pulled everything I could find on homicide. So on my days off, I was reading and digesting. When I went back to the command, I'd look at the closed cases. And so basically, I was schooling myself. Now, at the same time, because I'm a detective sergeant, I'm not catching the case. I had the ability to go down and watch the autopsies. So now I'm getting like a forensic class in autopsies, which I'm going to bring back to the field because I'm learning to make observations that I can make in the field when you're dealing with dead bodies. All right. So it was really it was very strenuous, but I had gotten my first master's degree when I was in the police department. I was still in narcotics. What I did is I did a sociological study on this young black male and female entrepreneurs who were not drug dealers. They were kind of like young superflies. And they were learning the trade because the old-time black dealers were going to jail under the Rockefeller laws. They were replacing them. And it was really interesting. It was like a subculture of a subculture. So those skills that I had doing that research, I brought to homicide. Now I'm researching homicide, but I'm actually doing the cases.
Right.
And because I'm a supervisor, I have supervision over multiple teams. So as I watched different teams do different things, I saw some was good, some was bad. Now getting back to your question. You arrive at the homicide scene. The first thing you have to do is freeze that event in time by photograph, by video, because you want everything intact. You don't touch anything. You don't pick anything up because everything has potential, especially in this day and age with touch DNA.
Right.
All right. We didn't have that back then. Back then, when I was a detective sergeant in homicide, we had the ABO system, 3 blood types, okay? That doesn't give you much. 1 in 3 in the population. In the early 1980s, they came up with PGM subtypes, which gave you 1 in 10 in the population. 1 in 10 is better than 1 in 3, right?
Right.
Along comes DNA, it's 1 in 80 million. It's like comparing a kid on a tricycle to somebody in a rocket ship. And don't forget, I'm forensically oriented, so I'm always looking for new tools. And when I was formulating the book, I was visiting all the ologists, the serologists, the anthropologists, the odontologists, the entomologists, you name the ologist, and I would ask for their papers, and I would rewrite what they did. Then I'd bring the papers back to them and says, is this what you do? Well, Sergeant, you made it look very easy. I says, well, we're not trying to do what you do.
Right.
We're trying to find out how we can use it for what we do. I even brought an entomologist to one of my crime scenes and had him collect the maggots because the body had been there and we couldn't tell how long. It was the summer, the body was bloated, everything is like this, It's disgusting. The flies are buzzing around and I says, and of course nobody's talking to us. This is an upscale neighborhood. Nobody wants to talk to the police. I'm saying, well, let's see what we can find out from the maggots. And sure enough, he took the maggots, he brought it back, he grew them in the laboratory. He tells us the homicide took place 5 days ago. So I go back and I recanvass the building with my detectives. Sure enough, the people on the floor below heard a gunshot, heard screams, but didn't call the police because they were going to Europe the next day. No such getting involved with the police.
Yeah, that's a whole bother I can't deal with right now.
Yeah, but the entomologist had the time of death right. So it's another skill.
Yeah,
it's great.
That's very cool. Yeah, that's seems like it's kind of wide open. You can you're the kind of guy that was just trying things out. Like, let me give this a try.
Yeah.
Throw it against the wall. Yeah, no
problem.
Well,
you think out of the box. It's another perfect example. I told you I had delivered papers as a kid, right? So it's night watch one night. I used to hate night watch, 12 to 8. The only good thing about night watch is there was people in the Bronx were getting killed, so it kept me busy. But it was one of those nights, it was kind of slow. It's 10 minutes to 8. It's time to go home. I can't wait to go home. Because we get a call. We got a schoolgirl raped on a rooftop in the 43rd Precinct area. What a shame. Here's a beautiful young kid going to Catholic school, gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning to deliver newspapers, and she gets attacked. And the story was that the guy followed her into the building.
Mm.
And so when I get there, the crime scene is being protected, and I'm listening to the story. And the girl's in the hospital. It looks like she might even go out of the picture. So what I did is I called for all detectives in the borough to respond. I want a total canvas and everything else. And looking at this, where the crime scene supposedly is, and I'm saying, this doesn't make any sense. Because when I delivered newspapers, I would go into one side of the building and work my way up. And I would go over the roof and work my way down. I wonder if she did the same thing. Went to the other roof landing, and son of a gun, I found the primary crime scene and the physical evidence that we needed.
No kidding.
So that's an example of bringing your skills from before back to into your present.
Wow,
and we got them.
That's really cool. Yeah, you weren't joking when you said these other jobs were building skills that would apply to homicide later.
Oh yeah, well I was a UPS driver during the one major organized crime case. I was a UPS driver. But I wasn't. I was a detective making observations.
But you could do it in a realistic way, I'm sure.
Yeah, I looked like the real deal. Had the brown suit and everything.
Yep, that's awesome. That's really cool. Vernon, when you, how can I word this? So when you do a homicide, because people watch a lot of TV, and a lot of TV is about cops because it's so interesting to people. How much of homicide work for you, when you have a case or when you're supervising a case, how much of it is actually intuition or like a gut feeling? Does that come into play a lot?
Well, absolutely. I was one of the first people to document the dynamic of staged crime scenes. Staged crime scenes are a problem for law enforcement because the event is presented as one thing and as something else. So I'll give you an example. Suicides. Suicides are what they call non-amenable offenses, so they don't get the department doesn't get credit for the time and effort in suicide investigations. So if someone's response to a death scene and it's purported to be a suicide, the easy way out is like, it's a suicide, no problem. Now that is a problem because it may not be a suicide. It may be a homicide staged as a suicide. So it's training the people not to react to the presentation, but to do the entire homicide protocol. Follow the checklists and field guides that I put together, because that'll give you the ammunition you need to find out whether or not this is really a suicide or it's a staged crime scene. And, I go back a bit. So, before these programs were out there, I think the only thing that was really out there in my early time was the like Dragnet, things like that, Joe Friday.
Just the
facts, man. Yeah. But here I am teaching all over the country, and I have a good reputation. My books are there. I'm in Las Vegas, and I'm teaching a class. I did two classes a year in Las Vegas every year. Unbeknownst to me, Vegas Metro invited producers in to see the program. They didn't tell me this. So I'm talking cop, and I'm talking about cases. That night, I get a call in my hotel room from Jerry Bruckheimer, CSI. Oh, Commander Geberth, there's a very interesting presentation. We'd like to talk to you about being a technical advisor on this new program we're forming called CSI.
Yeah,
so I'm going, CSI. He says, Mr. Bruckheimer, I says, that sounds very good, but, our job is hard enough without telling people how to do it. So Mr. Integrity is backing away, right? He says, I think you're making a mistake. You could make a lot of money. I said, money was never my problem. I said, I'm not interested. I'm interested in protecting the value of what we do. He said, well, can you recommend anybody? I said, I have a friend who's a lieutenant commander in California. He's a homicide guy. He handles serial murder cases, so I call him up. Ray, his name was Ray Biondi. Ray, you interested? He goes, hey, Vernon, our job is hard enough. I don't want to put this information out. He's the same as me. So female detective took the job, and she did fantastic.
That's funny.
I said, that is funny, but, I kept my integrity. I just, I'm a purist. What can I tell you?
Yeah, and were you afraid that if you gave them too much technical data, that it would kind of expose to criminals how these things are solved, or what was your?
Absolutely.
Is that,
It's happening every day.
yeah, yeah, it's kind of like when the news starts talking about a conflict and they're they're showing footage and the bad guys are all watching it.
Exactly. They watch it, and it's loose lips and sink ships. What can I tell you? But I have nothing against those shows. They're very entertaining. They're good. The only problem is they get to solve the murder in an hour.
Right.
It takes us more than an hour. It takes us days, weeks, and months.
Yeah, it's more entertaining if you can just wrap it. Go ahead and wrap that up in an hour for me.
Well, you talk about stage crime scenes. While I was a detective sergeant, I had a very interesting case because what happened, they broke up specialization. Some muckety-muck in headquarters thought it'd be nice to put detectives back in local precincts. Big mistake, because when you have specialization, people specialize, and they do the same thing all the time, and they get good at it. So they got rid of the homicide squad, the robbery squad, the burglary squad, but they didn't get rid of the female sexual assault squad because they didn't want to have an issue with the females. So within
That's
1
funny.
year, we had 100,000 robberies with a 3% clearance. We didn't investigate burglaries, and homicides were down to 20% clearance. Somebody goes, oops. So they
Jeez.
formed a task force, the Bronx Homicide Task Force, the Robbery Enhancement Unit, the Major Case Squad. So we're back to square one. In the interim, I got assigned to a precinct-level detective squad as a commander. Because I was a homicide sergeant, I got a command. Usually a lieutenant takes that job. So first thing I did, I came into the command and said, listen, I don't know how you're doing things here before, but it's going to change. I inherited 10 people, and I was allowed to bring 5 of my racehorses. So now my racehorses are all bent out of shape, what they do and what they call in bullshit cases. And the 10 people who haven't done anything for 10 years are bitching because they haven't done a lot of work.
Yeah.
So on paper, I got 15 people. In reality, I got a dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
All right. So I break everything up. I said, okay, here's how it's going to happen. I want a homicide detective on every team. And when the phone rings, I don't want to hear about, they're coming on at 4 o'clock. It's not my case. It's your case. We're one unit. We all do the same work. I don't care if somebody's off, you pick up their case, because when people call up the police department, they don't know about teams, and it's not my case, and it's
Right.
somebody else. I don't want to hear that shit. All right. We're all one. And I want a detective at every unattended death scene, because I don't want to find out later you didn't go and the medical examiner notifies us, by the way, you have a homicide. And now we have no crime scene.
Yeah.
What do we do? Perfect example. I'm working one day. My 2 racehorses are in court with an old homicide case. The guy on duty is a recalcitrant, lazy, 25-year veteran who's lazy as shit. His friend, the patrol sergeant, is 27 years on the job. He's even lazier. So a call comes in that a woman's drowned or committed suicide. All right? So I hear the conversation. I'm in my office. And I hear part of the conversation. No, we got this new pain in the ass. I'm going to have to go. He's talking about me. I'm the pain in the ass. And he doesn't know me. I'm like a Roman candle. It takes a while to light us, but watch out. We got to get all the balls out if the thing gets lit. So I says, what's going on, Bill? He's, some freaking broad drowned herself in the tub. I said, what? That doesn't sound, I'm going to go with you. No, don't bother. It's all bullshit. I said, now I'm definitely going with you. When I arrive at the scene, there is no scene, Steve. You got a family of hysterical, emotional Puerto Rican people who are very upset with the death of this young woman. I got a patrol sergeant standing with his thumb up his ass. I got an ambulance crew. They want to take the body. There ain't no crime scene. So I said to the detective, get a statement from the husband. The husband gives a stupid, long, complicated statement with a lot of times and different places. I said to the patrol sergeant, listen, I says, I get a gut feeling there's something wrong here. I don't like this. He had his brother call the police. He doesn't call the police. Let me take a look at this woman's body. I bend down, I fold her eyelids back. I see the evidence of petechial hemorrhage. Now, petechial hemorrhage is presumptive evidence of a throttling or strangulation.
I get those if I sneeze too hard. I get little red dots in my eyes.
Well, it's not proof. It's presumptive evidence.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
I take one look and I say to this patrol sergeant, we have a homicide here. His response, who the hell are you, Quincy? I said, no, I'm a detective sergeant. Now I'm telling you, clear this area. I want a crime scene, blah, 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 blah. Detective comes back and says, bring him in. I can't do that. He just lost his wife. I said, listen, stupid, he's a suspect. Bring him in. He's He's going to be a witness. All right, bring him in as a witness. Get him out of here. So now I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Who lived in the apartment? I find out it's the woman, the newborn, the 4-year-old, and an 8-year-old. So where is everybody? Well, the 4-year-old and the baby, the newborn, were whisked away into another apartment in the building. The 8-year-old's in school. I said, I got to get over the 8-year-old. Now, you can't go into school and conduct a homicide investigation. So I get a female relative from her side of the family. I says, I want you to go with me to the school. I want to speak to the 8-year-old. So when I arrive at the school, the principal goes, what's going on? I says, Mr. Principal, a terrible tragedy has ensued. They like words like ensued.
Sure.
We have to speak to the 8-year-old because she may have been traumatized. There's a suicide. Her mom committed suicide. Oh, my goodness, we could use my office. So the little girl comes in, very articulate, intelligent, and I start talking to her. Can you tell me what happened from the time you got up to the time you went to school? Well, I got up. My sister was watching Roadrunner cartoons, and Mommy and I had breakfast. Oh, what did Mommy eat? I want to find out what's in Mommy's body. What did Mommy eat? And what did you have? Okay, and so what time did you have to go to school? 8:25. And what time does school start? 8:30. So when you went to school, who was in your house? Oh, my mommy, my sister. Oh, yeah, and my daddy. He was fighting with Mommy. Now, his story was he wasn't in the apartment. So the woman with me starts, I knew that son of a bitch had something to do with this. I said, lady, shh, be quiet, right? And I said, do you believe in God? She goes, yeah. I said, I'm working for him. We got to get the kid out of here.
Yeah.
Anyway, principal comes in all bent out of shape. I said, don't worry, she's signing. As we walk out the building, now I got a problem. I have a civilian witness who knows that the husband did it. I got an 8-year-old girl who doesn't know what's going on. Thank God 2 of my real detectives showed up across the street, one of whom's Hispanic. I said, we got to move quick. We go to the apartment, and we interview the 4-year-old who only speaks Spanish. In Spanish, the little girl says, Papi grabbed Mommy by the neck. Papi squeezed Mommy's neck. Papi put Mommy in the bathtub. The 4-year-old saw the murder.
ProForce Law Enforcement, the best damn cop shop in the nation. Whether you are purchasing for an entire agency or an individual officer looking to buy firearms or duty gear, these guys are the best in the biz. With law enforcement exclusive pricing, ProForce Law Enforcement is a place you want to be buying your guns and duty gear. They carry all the top industry brands, and the guys and gals that work there understand exactly what law enforcement officers need. As a listener of this show, you get access to exclusive pricing on the gear you depend on every day. Visit tps.proforceonline.com for special deals in optics, duty gear, and tactical accessories that aren't available anywhere else. Really, really good deals on this. The link for that will be in the show notes. You can also visit their showroom in Prescott, Arizona, or store in Brea, California to get hands-on with the gear, or shop nationwide at proforceonline.com. Their dedicated law enforcement support team is always ready at 1-800-367-5855. Thank you, ProForce.
Okay.
Wow.
That's why you got to move fast. That's tactics, okay?
Yeah.
I come back to the apartment, and who's there but Benny the perp? The detective let him go. He's getting everybody charged up. You know how people are emotional? I know this, and I know that. And I said, excuse me, Benny, you're going to have to go back and sign some papers. I don't have to do shit. I know my rights. I said, well, I don't know what you're talking about, your rights. You're a witness, and I'm sure the family has to make funeral accommodation. So it would be better if you went back. And so now the family that he surrounded himself with is now pushing him out the door. Go with the nice detective.
Hey, come on, you jerk. What's your problem?
Yeah. So we get him to the station house. Now, I'm really pissed about what happened. I'm really I hate domestic violence homicides. It's so unnecessary. And I'm really aggravated. So I come to he's been given his rights and he's come in. I says, listen, Benny. I said, I'll tell you something. I says, at 1 o'clock this afternoon, your 4-year-old daughter's going to testify in the grand jury. She saw you. She saw what you did, you dirty bastard. Now, the 4-year-olds testify in the grand jury? No. Can I say that they do? Yes.
Yeah, a ruse.
Because I work for God. Yeah. Okay? These are all over the country. Plus, Frazier versus Cupp, United States Supreme Court decision. Trickery and deceit are allowed in the interrogation.
Yeah.
And I got him. And he went to jail for homicide. But there's an example of a staged crime scene, moving quest, tactics, procedures, and getting new. Now, suppose I didn't do that. And suppose the body was removed. The next day, the medical examiner told you have a homicide. Would we have gotten access to the kids? Right. Would we have gotten access to the crime scene? No. He would have got away with murder.
And that guy was just going to stuff it, sweep it.
Yep.
Oh, it sounds like a nightmare being the boss over there when you first came in.
Yeah, right.
Man, geez. So how long did you stay in that situation before they made specialty units again?
They never did. What they did is they formed
The
task
force.
forces.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Bronx Homicide Task Force. Now I'm still a detective sergeant. I had a lot of cases in my book, in the Godfather book. I go through all these different cases. There's some crazy cases that took place. And I finally, that's the other thing. When I wrote the book, I got in trouble. See, one thing about police work, don't ever do anything that is out of sync with what everybody else is doing.
You think you're special? What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, it was worse than that because I thought I was going to be congratulated. Excuse me.
Right. Yeah, you're like, man, they're going to be proud of me.
Well, it's the first book written in 20 years and by a New York City detective sergeant. That's a big deal.
Right.
Because the only books out there were 30, 20 years old, you know? So here I am getting pictures from other agencies, even the FBI, because they're in the book with the profiling. So everybody's, is cooperating. I'm saying, well, I know what I'm dealing with here. So I put a request in for official crime scene photographs. But the way I worded the request was, I'm requesting official crime scene photographs to be used in my textbook that I'm writing on homicide. Sure as shit. Goes down. Denied. You're looking to benefit financially from a product of the city of New York. You stupid bastards. I have my own pictures. I was giving you an opportunity, all right?
Right.
So the book comes out, and they have a headline in the local newspaper, New York Daily News. The cop who wrote the book on murder. Hey, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, 15 minutes later, I got this scumbag captain from Internal Affairs. Congratulations, Sergeant. I see you wrote a book. I said, yes, sir. You're under investigation. I said, for what? You violated department protocol. I said, I don't know what you're talking about, Captain. He says, by what authority did you write that book? I said, how about the First Amendment? You're a wise guy. I said, how about the Second Amendment? I think I'll shoot you. He put me under investigation. Later on, I found out that this turd ordered crime scene pictures from every homicide scene that I responded to in my career. We're talking about between 600 and 800 homicides. Okay? The zone that I worked in had 225 homicides a year in a 6.5 square mile area.
Wow.
This is a murder capital. So he's ordering all these pictures, and he's trying to match the picture to the pictures in the book. It's not going to happen because I have my own pictures. It's different format. So now I'm getting the blessings. All of a sudden, the police commissioners congratulate me and this and that. So what happens is he calls me up. Sergeant, what's the difference between official and unofficial photographs? I said, read chapter 6, you frickin' moron. The chapter's on photographs. I beat him.
That's awesome. That must have felt so good.
It did feel good until I got promoted to lieutenant, and the chief of detectives, another piece of work, says he's going to teach me humility.
Nice.
He thought I should bring the manuscript. He thought I should bring the manuscript down and let him put his name on it, right? So when I got promoted to lieutenant, I should have been retained. I was the top homicide commander in the Bronx. Okay. Instead, and while I'm in lieutenant school, it's funny because all the boogeyman outfits are trying to hire me. Internal Affairs, Field Control, they all want me as a lieutenant. I said, no, my uniform's fine. Don't worry about it. I went to this precinct called the Alamo, the 4-6 precinct. I was a desk officer. I became the ultimate desk officer. I shaped that place up, 1, 2, 3, had them acting like Marines by the time I finished. And the guy who did that to me retired, and 3 months later, I was back into the bureau as a lieutenant. So I went to one squad first as a probationary lieutenant, detective lieutenant. Then I got my permanent command in the South Bronx in the 4-0 squad. Great group of people. And then I got promoted to lieutenant commander at the Bronx Homicide. So all my procedures were now in the City of New York Police Department. They had a little rank behind me.
Yeah, isn't the politics terrible? I mean,
politics.
I mean, it's still going on. I hear NYPD guys on social media, on podcasts. As soon as they retire, they start opening their mouths about it, and it is nuts.
Well, you know what it is? At least I know what direction the bad guys are coming from, because they're the bad guys. It's those assassins that work in the building you got to watch out for. They get you in the back. Okay, I always to one police plaza I call it the Tower of Babel. We literally have people that have spent 20 years in that goddamn building. Okay, And they know all about the rules. They're like the Pharisees at the time of Jesus, right? They had all the rules down, but they hadn't figured out the big story yet.
Whitewashed tombs.
These fuckers come after you. But I beat them every time because, listen, I was aware of institutional protocols, what had to be done. I always covered my ass. But as a boss, and first thing would be I first became a sergeant, I knew my responsibility was to the people that worked under me to protect them. That was my job as a boss. And when I became a commander, I was even more adamant about that. They would send missiles in from headquarters. I would intercept the missiles so my cops could do their job. That's
what a good boss is supposed to do. That's great.
Yeah.
You know, those inside cops we just talked about in the podcast last month, the female deputy chief that was making like $490,000 a year because of overtime for paperwork. It was like, really? And then they're busting the chops of the troops that have legitimate overtime. They're like, oh, you're working too much.
Yeah, with arrests.
Yeah.
Well, don't do as I do as I say,
Right. Vernon, can you take us through one of your most memorable homicides?
I don't want to sound arrogant, but I got like 8,000 cases in my life. You know what makes cases memorable? Either the circumstances under which it occurred, the victimology, the family interaction that I had, or some tactic. Because I can't just say there's one case. Every case is unique to me.
Is there a particularly bizarre or strange one?
Oh, yeah, there's one really bizarre case. Did you see the movie Hannibal?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know Mason Verga, the man who fed his face to the dogs?
I don't know.
You remember that character, Mason Verga?
Yeah.
That's my case from the Bronx.
You're kidding me. He gives him the popper.
It was stolen out of my textbook.
No kidding.
Well, let me tell you how that went down.
Wow.
We got 2 calls early morning, one from the hospital, one from the crime scene. At the hospital, they're asking for detectives because of a possible assault victim, and he's in very bad condition. At the crime scene, the sergeant's asking for detectives, possible homicide. So I stop at the hospital first to take a look at this mess, and it is a mess. I got a gauze-covered man moaning and carrying on, and I go to the crime scene. And the sergeant had corralled some dogs into the bathroom to round them up. It was in the basement of a building. I look in the bathroom. I see a couple of drops of blood. I said, that doesn't make any sense. This guy's a mess.
Right.
So going through the basement, I come to a recliner, and I see a smashed mirror. This individual was under the influence of PCP, and he got nuts with the PCP, and he smashed the mirror, and he began to literally peel his face from his skull. His entire face was taken off, and he gouged out one eye.
Oh, my gosh.
And the PCP in his system kind of anesthetized him, and he's peeling his face, and I'm sorry, I hit the microphone.
No problem.
He's peeling his face, and he's feeding the dogs.
Oh,
now, how do I know this? Because I'm in the crime scene, I can't find any face. I have to save face, right?
Oh,
There's no explanation. I said, take those dogs down to ASPC, have their stomachs pumped. Sure enough, they pumped the dogs' stomachs. I got a bag full of face. Now, you can't do nothing with it because of the enzymes. You can never. Now I go back to the hospital, and now I got about 25 doctors, and everybody's all around this guy. So I says, excuse me. I says, I need a witness. I'm going to ask him a question. That's always good to clear the crowd.
Yeah, no one wants to be that guy, especially doctors.
They all ran away. I says, get the gauze off his mouth. I say, take the gauze off his mouth, and they get close to what used to be his ear. And I go, what happened to you? And all of a sudden he goes, like a mechanical mouth. I says, oh my God, I finally lost it. I'm talking to a cadaver, and the cadaver's talking back. I got to go for surgery. Anyway, I followed that case because it was so weird, and I documented everything up to and including the reconstruction where they take what they do, what's called a pectoral flap. They cut from the chest, and they fold the skin to the face. It eventually grafts on, forms its own blood vessels, etc., and then they cut. When they graft, then they cut. And eventually make him a face, but the guy had fried his brains with PCP. He became a ward of the state. I put that
money
case
well
in
spent,
the book.
I guess.
Oh, it's a waste of money as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
But hey, listen, it's a life. The bottom line is that Thomas Harris, who's going to the FBI because they're the smartest people in the world, right? They have my book. So he's going through my book and he sees the case. Next thing you know, he takes that case and puts it in his movie, in his textbook.
What?
Now, I don't know nothing about it. I start getting calls from UPI, Associated Press. Commander Geberth, do you realize that your case is in the movies? And I said, no, I haven't gone to the movies in a long time. So I find out, I get the book. I go, son of a bitch. So I send a note off to this Thomas Harris. I say, hey, by the way, I says, I got 2 master's degrees. I says, I was always trained to cite my sources. What school did you go to? 6 months later, I get a Xerox copy of his note because he thinks his signature's worth money. I apologize for the oversight. In all future copies, I'll recognize your fine work, Commander Geberth.
This should be good enough.
Yeah, right? I don't sue anybody, but that's an example of a very, very bizarre case.
Oh, I remember watching that, and it was, I watched that 20 years ago, but I remember the part where I think Hannibal gives him, like, he takes a popper or something and then talks him into cutting his own face.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
That scene was so disturbing. I mean, that whole movie, those whole series was disturbing to me, but
it was, especially eating the brain and things. I mean, it's just like nonstop.
Oh yeah, he's talking to the guys like, "How's your brain?" It's good, thanks.
Yeah, with the brain, with the
Ray Liotta. Oh my.
But something. That case was probably my most bizarre case. And what I did is, what happened then, because people are crazy. They go online, they start saying things, and Snopes. I know people out on the West Coast, they're goofy. I became a fellow in the American Academy of Forensic Science. Again, another credential after my name. It makes me look like I'm smart. Well, I got all these credentials, but I never lost my common sense.
You're fairly smart, I can tell.
No, but I didn't let higher education corrupt my morals or my,
Right. That's the challenge. That's the challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge. But I presented that case at the American Academy for no other reason than to document it clinically so that there would be no doubt where this case came from and what it was about. So I did. But I had I had so many cases, Steve. It's, I don't want to sound like I'm some sort of Superman. It's just that they're unique for different reasons.
I read all about it, Vernon. I know it's true. So you were getting called a lot for like notable cases. So like, did you get called? I thought I saw you got called for the BTK killer. Is that true?
Yes, I worked behind the scenes with Wichita Police Department and the KBI, Kansas Bureau of Investigation. BTK, as BTK, before it was named. BTK was responsible for a series of horrific killings in the city of Wichita.
Bound, torture, kill, right?
Bound, torture, kill. Well, he named himself. But what happened, it was the Otero family. And it was the mother, the father, the little brother, and he took little Josephine down to the basement. He hung her and masturbated on her as she was dying. Now, there was quite a bit of biological fluid. That case went cold. Now, I came into Wichita around 1988 to instruct a class. And what had happened, ironically, at the same time, BTK reemerged by taking credit for a sex-related homicide that stimulated him psychologically and sexually. And he claimed to have done it. He didn't do it. But by him reemerging, it forced the authorities to reopen the case. Now, interestingly enough, the detective who reopened the case, Detective Ken Landwehr, ultimately became the commander of Wichita Homicide. But it's 1988. So I said to him, listen, I might be able to help you with this case. I'm working with a DNA firm because I had the first DNA case in New York State, the third one in the country. Give me some of that biological fluid from the Otero homicide. Brought it back to New York. And as a result, we could biologically and neurologically, molecularly identify the BTK killer with that evidence. But nobody knew about it because there was no suspect. So, but that was the first DNA print on BTK. Then he went dormant again. And then 30 years later, in 2004, he reemerges with a series of communications. Now, during that time, I was in the backfield. I was in touch with Wichita, with Ken Landwehr, and Larry Thomas from the KBI. And I was giving ideas about, what you might want to say when you talk to him, because the more they talk, the better it is, because every time they say something, a little piece of information leaks out.
Yeah.
And as a result, and that was another problem, the damn media began to get packages and would beat the police to the crime scene to take pictures before the police processed the information. It was really disturbing. Anyway, what happens is in 2004, he sends a communication with a driver's license of one of the victims and information on a 1986 case. Okay? Well, that was very important because that case had been written off. The husband became the suspect, but there was no evidence. Now he's claiming he did it. Now everything is coming together. I'm saying, wow, this is interesting. Another piece of evidence. Eventually, it comes up with a surveillance. They see his truck at a Home Depot dropping another package in someone else's vehicle. So now they have a possible suspect. This is great, but they have no evidence except that 1988 DNA print, but they need something fresher. In one of the most ballsiest moves of a director of KBI, orders his detectives to seize a pap smear of the daughter of BTK from the college because they go for routine examinations.
Mm-hmm.
The pap smear is taken to Topeka, and overnight they cannot rule out that this specimen did not come from the biological father, BTK. So now they have enough to go. It was big. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
Now the game plan was, and I helped sit down with this, is that each homicide had their own team of detectives. Very, 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 very smart, because they were all extremely knowledgeable about each segment of the case and each piece of evidence. The game plan was to take him on a Friday afternoon in the street, because one of the communications indicated he had a bomb with a remote. He was taken down in the street and brought to a federal building where nobody would know he was under arrest. The game plan was to question him throughout the weekend with each team, okay, and on Monday do a formal arraignment. That was a very good strategy. So what happens? It's a federal building. The FBI decides to announce to the world, the FBI has arrested the BTK killer.
Oh, my gosh. Couldn't help themselves. Had to do it.
That's why FBI means to me famous but incompetent. They just screwed up the whole thing. Now, what happens is as soon as they make that announcement, the news media goes crazy. I get a call from Director Larry Welch, KBI. Vernon, we have him, but we have a gag order. You're going to be getting a call from the news media. You need to take our position because we can't speak. That's no problem. So phone calls start coming, and they always come. CNN, screw CNN. I go to Fox News. So I go to Fox News that night, and who's the host but Greta Van Susteren? You know, the one who looks like she got hit by a truck a couple of times. And anyway,
I don't remember her. No.
she's a nasty person. Anyway, I have to get the information out, but I can't volunteer it. They have to ask me a specific question. So I tell the producer, get Greta on the phone because I got to tell her something. So she's all bent out of shape. Commander, what's so important? I'm trying to prepare a show. So I'm going to give you an exclusive, but you got to ask me this question because I can't volunteer it. Oh. So the first panel is this muckety-muck from the FBI, from the Houston office, a real jackass. The Bureau, the FBI. Now they switched to Vernon Geberth. Yeah, the FBI had nothing to do with this. This is a Wichita homicide. They canceled Bureau investigation, blah, blah, blah. And I laid the whole thing out. And the next day, all the news media is jumping all over the place. So that was my contribution to protect the integrity.
They must have loved
of
you in Wichita.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
FBI wasn't very happy, but I could care less.
That's awesome. Wow, that is crazy. I mean, DNA really has changed the game now, too. And
the first case I had, it was called RFLP technology. It was the Model T Ford of DNA, and it wasn't really that specific. And because it was in New York State, and everything gets litigated in New York State, you know that, right?
Yeah.
The two Weisenheimers from the defense attorney's office are trying to poo-poo the DNA. And what came down is, the bottom line is, it was a 50-50. It was 50-50 for the state, 50 for the state, 50 for the defense. But the bottom line is, our guy was identified. And to show you the power of DNA, We had a murder the previous year in another building he was assigned to clean, and the DNA matched that murder case. We had a serial killer, didn't even know it.
Wow.
And then when the O.J. Simpson case came in, those two characters that were fighting with me, they were representing O.J. Simpson. But by 1994, DNA had increased with PCR, polymerase chain reaction, and the advances are exciting from a scientific perspective.
Yeah.
So, and where we are today is unbelievable.
I know. I remember when I was a cop on Cape Cod for a while, and we used to live there. And Krista Worthington got murdered in Truro, and it was a big. I mean, Truro has 1,200 year-round residents, and maybe in the summer there's 4,000 or 5,000. But she got murdered, and the only person that went to the house was like the trash guy and somebody else. So it was between these two people, and they were trying to figure it out. But in the early stages, they had at the Truro post office in their little store, there was law enforcement stationed with swabs. And they were asking the public for volunteer DNA samples for this case. And especially at that point, 20 years ago, nobody the general public they knew it existed, but they didn't know the accuracy or anything else. And nobody was giving them, they're like, oh, what's going on? No one's giving us samples. We're like, oh yeah, no one's going to give their DNA to the government. Well,
that was taken from the blooding from England, the first case. In the liquor store, where the two little girls in 1983 and 1986 were killed, raped, and murdered 3 years apart, Scotland Yard realized they had a serial killer. So they asked Dr. Alec Jeffries to examine the biological evidence. And they had a guy under arrest who confessed. And Alec Jeffries, using our FLP DNA technology, said, I can have good news and bad news. The good news is I can molecularly and biologically link one donor offender to both cases. The bad news is the guy you have under arrest didn't do it. That's the power of DNA.
Yeah.
Rick, this clown that confessed, he's the first person in the world to be exonerated with DNA technology. And the perp, who's named Colin Pitchfork, that's a good name for a perp, he becomes the first person who is charged and convicted based on DNA. It's a remarkable story. But what you talk about, there's a book called The Blooding by Joseph Wombar, in which they had lined up all males between 17 and 34 were required to give a blood sample.
This was overseas?
Colin Pitchfork, yes, in England.
Can't do that in America.
No, you can't. And Colin Pitchfork paid somebody to give blood in his name. And the first thing he did, he went to a pub and he started toasting. Oh, yeah, this is on Colin. That's the barmaid rings him up. Scotland Yard comes up and snap him up.
Can't keep their mouths shut.
Amazing.
You know? Half these people, they just keep their mouths shut. Man.
Yeah, I know.
Vernon, I have to ask, because it's New York City, of the homicides you did you have a lot of mob-related murders, mob hits, stuff like that?
Yeah, we had mob-related hits, and they're much different than other hits, because usually what the mob does is they try to render the remains unidentifiable or you can't find them, one or the other. And one thing with the mob hits is you don't get solve that case right away. What usually happens is we pick them up on wires. I worked on the mafia for 2 years straight with wires and bugs, and it's one of the most amazing things to listen to these mob guys talk. It's like listening to the Sopranos, okay? They're telling war stories about what they did, and it's interesting. What they do is they end up giving up homicides that we couldn't solve, and we hear about it, and then somebody turns, and the next thing you know, they're giving us bodies. So it's like with the Goodfellas case. That was a perfect example. Those bodies were given up by informants.
Yeah. Yeah, that's.
Well, we had a lot of drug-related homicides in the Bronx. The crack cocaine phenomena, that was unbelievable. I mean, they were dropping left and right.
Yeah, I know. I remember when I was a kid, it was like the 80s and 90s, and like New York City was like, if you heard someone was going to New York City, you were like, don't get murdered. Because like the subway, everything else was just a bloodbath everywhere. It was just known as a city that was, I think it was like, the most violent city in America. It was terrifying to go to New York City.
Well, until Giuliani cleaned it up, it was, okay? And now we're back to square one with these jackasses. We've got a jackass as a governor, jackass as a mayor, and we got a city council, they're all communists. And the state legislature, they're all, this black idea that you can't be arrested if you're black. No, it has nothing to do with black and white. It has something to do with right and wrong. okay? And they're making it impossible. Now they're coming up with something new. They don't want police to pull cars over.
I saw that.
Isn't that
Routine motor
ridiculous?
vehicle stops out the window.
Well, remember that movie, Escape from New York?
Yeah.
Well, that's what's going to happen.
Unbelievable. Vernon, the books, they're still, I'm sure they're still being sold. I mean, it sounds like you've sold a ton of them already, but they've been revised. When was the last time you revised the Practical Homicide investigation?
Practical Homicide is the most recent one. A sexual-related homicide, I can't revise because I can't publish it again. The information in the sexual-related homicide is so horrific and so pointedly, it could be called prejudicial because you talk about behavior. The clinicians are using my book, psychiatrists, etc. I can't revise that book, partly because of the stories, because of the pictures, because of the cases, but also because some of the determinations that are made. We're talking about psychopathy and narcissism and the types of personalities who do things. So it's a shame that, they haven't burned my books yet. That'll be the next, I'll have a book burning. But so far they still are. But the one thing is, like, the Godfather of Homicide book is my life story. And in that the Godfather book are a number of cases that I was involved with, and kind of interesting, and it kind of explains how I got to be who I am. I mean, this Godfather of Homicide, I don't know, that's a pretty neat phrase. I didn't call myself that.
If you could pick a nickname, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, it's pretty nice.
I have your website on the screen right now. It looks like you can get it on the website, or does the website just link you to Amazon?
Yeah, go to Amazon. Yeah, you go to Amazon. The website just advertises what's up there. Yeah.
Okay. There's the man himself right there. Look at all those hash
We
marks.
Work for God signs. Those We Work for God signs, I've distributed about 90,000 of those across the world. And what's kind of neat is every once in a while, if you see the first 48 and they go into the cubicle, in the cubicle is one of my We Work for God signs. So I know he's one of my students.
Oh, my gosh, that's so cool.
It's a neat feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Vernon, I feel like we're at an hour here, and you've been generous with your time. I feel like we could keep going. Maybe you'll come back for a second episode down the road if you have the time.
We could talk about some cases outside the city of New York. There's some really interesting ones.
Absolutely. I mean, it was an absolute honor to have you on, and I will I'll put a link in the show notes to your website and to your books, of course. And just thank you very much. Do you have any social media you want people to follow you on?
No, I don't know how to do that stuff. You talk about Instagram and X. No, I have a Facebook page. That's it.
Hey, you got a website. That's pretty good.
Well, I have a website because I was teaching, and the website. In addition, people should know that on the website there's papers and things you can download. If you're in this business and you want information, go to the research materials, and there's papers and clinical papers that I've written that you can avail yourself from. Because I believed in sharing this information. That's how we learn. Yeah, we learn from each other.
Absolutely.
And after giving my entire life to practical homicide investigation, I'm going to be retired now. So that's
good for you. It. Well, Vernon, it was an absolute honor to have you on. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and God bless.
Yes, sir. And I'm gonna go do the outro. Can you hang on for like 2 minutes so we can chat afterwards?
Sure.
Awesome. The great Lieutenant Commander Vernon Geberth. Wow. Great stories. The guy's got so much knowledge. Absolutely got to talk him into coming back because I want to hear more about this stuff. Very cool. Thank you. Thank you again for coming on, sir. This is the time in the show where we thank the Patreon sponsors. Who I'm talking about these are lieutenant level, the great and powerful Andy Biggs. Congratulations on your promotion, sir. Lieutenant Kyle Roberts, thank you. Michael Roach from Roach Machines AI Solutions, thank you, sir. The great Thomas Connell, everybody. Now to the sergeants, Adam Alexander, Adam McMahon, Adam Mihal, everybody, Ben Peters, Brad Thompson, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards, amazing woodworker. Check him out on Instagram. Sherry Finch, thank you. Madam Clark LaCuff, everybody. Dave Ellman, thank you. Dennis Carrasquillo, ladies and gentlemen. Doug and Kelly Newman. Hope you're liking Wyoming. God bless you guys. Dylan Mosher, ladies and gentlemen. Elliot Sykes, Gabriel Decknop, thank you. The great Gary Steiner. George Carey Otis, Greg Gadboy, the great Jackson Dalton from Black Box Safety. Thank you, sir. James Rose, Jason Labrie, everybody. Jason Lau, Jessica King, gotta start it again. John Jordan, John Shoemaker, John and Aaron Kate, love you guys, see you at church. Lauren Stimson, the handsome Lane Campbell, Lisa Gano, thank you. Iceman Motorcop Chronicles, Nancy Hammond, Nick Adams, Paul Maloney, Raymond Arsenal, Richard Tolles, keep on trucking, brother. The great Sasha McNabb, Sam Conway, thank you. Scott Young, Sean Clifford, Seth Wright, Sheriff Ronald Long, thank you, sir. Tammy Walsh, holding it down dispatch, thank you, Tammy. Tony Fahey, Zachary Pleat, and George Tessier, love you, buddy, see you at church. Guys, thank you for the continued support. The list is getting long, and you know I love that, so thank you very much. If you really love the show, you've heard all the free episodes, and you want to contribute and support, the link is in the show notes for Patreon on there. And I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.